세계해양포럼 참석자 여러분 안녕하세요. 타일러입니다. 올해 세계해양포럼을 맡게 되어서 정말 영광인데요. 이 세계해양포럼이라는 단어를 들어보면 조금 생소한데요 싶을 수도 있죠. 15회를 맞이하는 세계해양포럼은 사실 2007년부터 시작을 했는데요. 해양수산부, 부산광역시, 부산일보사가 매년 공동으로 개최를 하고 있습니다. 대한민국에서 최장수의 해양 전문 포럼입니다. 지난 14년간 세계해양포럼은요, 수산, 해운항만, 조선, 크루즈, 해양도시, 그리고 네트워크부터 시작해서 해양환경까지 여러 가지 굉장히 많은 분야에서 심도 있게 세션을 그동안 진행했는데요. 총 50여 개국에서 참석자들이 있었는데 그 총 참석자 수를 보면 44,000여 명이에요. 진짜 장난 아니에요. 이게 진짜 영향력이 있는 포럼이라는 거예요. WOF가 혁신적인 해양 전략과 글로벌 해양 이슈를 이제 알아보는 그런 여정을 해나가겠습니다. 본격적으로 이번 세션을 진행해 보도록 하겠습니다. 근데 바다라고 하면 여러분이 바로 떠올리는 게 뭐가 있을까요? 당연히 우리가 맛있게 먹는 해산물은 있지만 요즘에 참 문제가 많죠. 해양 플라스틱 문제라든지 아니면 무분별한 산업 발달로 인해서 환경이 파괴가 되고 있는 부분, 혹은 인간의 활동으로 인해서 기후위기, 여러 가지 바다와 관련된 문제들이 있죠. 이런 거를 생각해 보면 사람과 바다의 관계를 다시 생각해 볼 필요가 있겠죠. 그래서 오늘 여러분들께 소개해 드리고 싶은 아주 중요한 작품이 하나 있습니다. 2021년 미국에서 오스카의 장편 다큐멘터리를 수상했는데요. 근데 그 상만 받은 게 아니라 아주 많은 상을 받은 넷플릭스 오리지널 다큐멘터리인데요. 나의문어선생님입니다. 우울증과 불면증으로 힘들어하는 주인공 크레이그 포스터라는 분이 남아프리카 바다에 있는 해초숲을 헤엄치며 이렇게 수영을 하면서 아주 특별한 문어를 만나게 되는데요. 그 문어와 교감도 하고 문어한테 배워가는 여러 가지가 있는데 그 이야기를 담은 아주 특별한 다큐멘터리입니다. 그래서 오늘 세계해양포럼이 이 다큐멘터리의 화자이자 제작자이자 주인공은 아닌 건가? 문어가 더 주인공인 건가? 네, 어쨌건 크레이그 포스터를 초대했습니다. 지금 보시는 이 영상은 세계해양포럼 공식 유튜브 채널에 올라갈 거니까요. 언제든지 다시 편하게 보실 수 있게 되어 있습니다. 많은 관심 부탁드리겠습니다. 꼭 구독도 눌러주세요. 그리고요, 이번 인터뷰 끝나고 계속 영상을 보시면요, 다큐멘터리 영화 나의 문어 선생님의 티저 영상도 나와요. 그러니까 끝까지 잘 지켜봐 주세요. 자, 그럼 더 미루면 안 되겠죠? 바로 인터뷰에 들어가야 됩니다. 그럼 크레이그 포스터 연결을 해볼까요? Hi, Craig, can you hear me?
I can, but I can only see you as a tiny little person in the top of my screen. I wish I could see you better.
It's okay, I'm not really much to look at.
Voice sounds fantastic.
Thank you,
I can see a tiny bit better now, but yeah, it's still quite small. Not too much of a problem.
Okay, well, are you alright if we just go ahead and get started?
Of course.
Okay, great. Well, first off, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. My name is Tyler. I've been the brand ambassador here in South Korea for WWF since 2016, and today I'm going to be conducting this interview at the 15th century of the World Oceans Forum. So thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. This is being recorded, so I would just ask you for just a sec to introduce yourself, who you are, and just maybe give us a brief description in your own words of your own documentary, My Octopus Teacher.
Okay. Thanks, Tyler. Lovely talking to you, and thanks for doing this. I'm Craig Foster. I'm a naturalist. I'm a filmmaker. And I was the producer with our incredible, wonderful, big team on My Octopus Teacher recently. The film is about an extraordinary relationship I had with a female octopus in the Great African Sea Forest, and she really was a teacher at the highest level, and I learned so much about octopus behavior, but I learned a lot about myself as well from this really fantastic cephalopod.
Yeah, as a viewer as well, I mean, I obviously saw the documentary. It was just incredible. I'm gonna have a bit of a fan moment for a second here. It's just incredible the way that you went about creating this experience for the viewer where we could also build a relationship with the natural world. And it was just in such a different way that you see in other documentaries. So I want to ask you a question about sort of your approach to this documentary in particular. Usually when we see a documentary about nature or species that are not humans, it's usually from sort of a distance perspective, right? But you were able to actually put yourself into the documentary and participate in the ecosystem and really build that relationship and show it to us. How did you go about doing that? How long did it take you to find that octopus and build that relationship?
Great question, Tyler. I mean, I think this whole story of connection is such a powerful thing. And I guess my whole life I've been trying to connect with nature and struggled. I have struggled. And then about just over 10 years ago, I decided to dive in this great African sea forest every day for years and years. And I've been doing it now for over 10 years, pretty much every day. It took about 4 or 5 years before I was diving every day when I actually met my incredible octopus teacher. So you can imagine going in this environment every day, learning the ways of these animals, learning to track underwater. So I taught myself to track underwater, following these tiny little signs and marks to predict what animals were doing in the night or might be even doing in the future. So it's about becoming so relaxed in this environment, so used to it, and so just doing it every single day. I think that was a huge advantage in being able to capture this feeling that you feel of being there. I mean, that's what myself and the whole team try to do, is get the sense of what it's actually like to be in that environment as a human, what it's like to be part of that environment. But it's many, many, many years of passion and dedication to get to that point. And what's fantastic is, I wasn't expecting people to feel it so strongly, but clearly people have. I think most humans are very connected to nature. They might not know it, but in there, just under the skin, they're very connected and they feel it immediately. So that was super exciting to get that response.
Did you, I mean, you mentioned that you taught yourself to track underwater. And I know that you have done other documentaries I've heard about indigenous communities, and I think also relating to their tracking practices. Is that correct? So did you go,
yes.
like, I've never heard of anybody tracking underwater or that being a concept. So you sort of just, as you were diving, you decided to apply principles, or you were discovering new principles? How did that process, can you just tell me a little bit more about that process?
Yeah, great question, Tyler. So I was very fortunate for many years to work with my brother up in the Kalahari area of Southern Africa. And we were mentored and taught by a group of San trackers who'd spent most of their life in the wild, tracking wild animals. And I was deeply inspired by them. And we made quite a few films about what they did and got quite close to them. So when I came back to my childhood environment, this underwater sea forest, I thought, is there any way I could apply some of this and this ability that I'd seen these incredible men and women on land doing? And at first, the first year, I couldn't see a single track. And in the second year, I started to notice these small slime trails of mollusks on the rocks. And in the third year, more. And suddenly, there was just this enormous number of tracks everywhere, incredible subtle bite marks, little eggs laid everywhere, signs in the sand, octopus digging tracks. I can just go on and on and on. And the secret world just started to erupt before my eyes. It was so exciting to connect at that level, because tracking is so much part of our deep psyche. That's what we've done since the beginning of time to understand our environment. So I really felt this. It was such a wonderful feeling getting to know the tracks and develop. It was very slow because I had no one to teach me except the animals themselves. And then of course my octopus teacher and many of these other extraordinary animals that I got to know in the forest really helped me to understand tracking and then of course to get inside their secret lives.
So really dedication, time, immersing yourself and observation. Do you think that if other people take these basic principles and really devote themselves to other ecosystems in that way, that they can also sort of discover tracks over time? Do you think that humans can do that sort of innately?
I know humans can do that. I mean, it's what we were designed to do from the beginning of time. Anybody, if you just spend enough time, especially every day, and it can be quite boring, nothing happening, but right in front of your eyes, there are thousands of extraordinary signs. Even in the city, animals are leaving signs everywhere. There's no place on earth where animals are not leaving signs. And to tap into that ignites something deep in our evolutionary memory. And it connects us to who we are. This idea of looking at a track and imagining what that animal was doing. And then almost identifying at a deep level with that animal has a wonderful effect on the human psyche.
So going back to the animals themselves, this octopus, this teacher that you met, I know, from watching the documentary, there are so many instances where you explain and show just incredible intelligence that most people have not been exposed to in another species, right? And above all, in a cephalopod, right? Something that someone would really not expect. So were there any moments that were not in the documentary or were not caught on film where you were really impressed by the intelligence of this octopus or another species in that ecosystem?
Many instances, Tyler. I mean, you can only fit 85 minutes into a documentary like this. And I've got thousands and thousands of hours experience in the water with these animals. So there's so many special things they can do. They can dig into the sand, almost like putting their arms down into the sand as if it's like a hot knife going through butter to find mollusks. The way that they have over 50 different prey they hunt. And each one of those animals, they have to have a different strategy for hunting. And these are, very difficult animals to hunt in many ways. So they have these incredible strategies and they change their strategy depending on how well it's working or not. So, there are just countless examples of that. Incredible other forms of camouflage, using sand, all sorts of things. So these are highly innovative creatures that are changing their thinking the whole time to maximize their experience in this underwater environment.
So this, I feel like watching this documentary, for me at least, has really transformed my own perspective about intelligence in general and animals in general, nature in general. But I think it's touched a lot of people, and obviously the documentary has received tons of awards, right? An Oscar, an Academy Award. What do you find, what do you think as a filmmaker was sort of the driving force behind this documentary that brought it so much attention and so much acknowledgement and so many awards, essentially?
Well, I think one of the things that you've touched on it before is that people, as we get further down the line in this sort of capitalist environment, you start wondering, well, what's important in our lives? And a big part of what's important is being connected to one's family, one's friends, but also being connected to the original mother. Now, the original mother, I'm talking about Mother Nature, that's nurtured our species for 300,000 years. Across impossible odds to bring us here today where we are in 2021. And people know in their deepest of hearts that this great mother has kept us breathing, has kept us eating, has kept us alive, has nurtured us for this extraordinary time period. And we've done nothing much to reciprocate, especially in later years. We've almost forgotten that this great mother is behind every single financial, political, social issue that we face. This is the foundation of everything that we are. And I think the film hopefully just touches a tiny bit on the essence of how extraordinary this great mother is through the eyes of, this one animal and this ecosystem. So, and I think people are very in tune with this, and they pick that up. And that's what the spark happened, and you talk about intelligence. I mean, the ecosystem here that I've got to know well, but all ecosystems around the planet have an extraordinary intelligence they've built up over millions of years, and you can really sense that natural intelligence in these ecosystems. And all we need to do is just give them a little bit of a chance to recover, to regenerate. It's in our best interest. We are only here because of that great Mother Nature.
Right, and you talked about regeneration and ecosystem. So I want to get to this word that you've been using a lot, which is the Great African Sea Forest. So this is the first time that I've encountered this expression, and as far as I know from what I've looked up, it seems to be an important word. So can you just tell us very quickly what the Great African Sea Forest is?
Thanks, Tyler. Yes, it's approximately 1,400 kilometers of underwater sea forest, a giant underwater forest that stretches around the tip of southern Africa. It was my underwater home as a child, so I'm obviously deeply connected and love this environment very much. And as our group, our NGO is called Sea Change, and we wanted to name it. We wanted to give it a name so that people could attach to it and see how important this extraordinary ecosystem was. So we gave it this name, and part of our mission is to promote this place and protect this place and regenerate it as much as possible.
Right, and this is where so if someone goes and watches My Octopus Teacher, the space within which you are meeting and discovering this octopus is part of the Great African Sea Forest, correct? So as someone who has never set foot in Africa, why is this important to people around the world, and why should they take interest in the Great African Sea Forest?
It's your original home. If you had to come here, I'd say, Tyler, welcome home, because it seems many top scientists believe that Southern Africa to be the origin of our species. And we have extraordinary evidence along this coast for some of the earliest of this evidence, and really unprecedented evidence for the awakening of the human mind, the first art, the first science, the first chemistry. So it's this place where we've had the longest relationship with the wild as a species. And this kelp forest and the animals in this environment have been very critical for that survival. So if we can't keep the original home of our human species thriving, then what is there left for us? So there's still a lot of intact ecosystems here. Many of the animals have been knocked hard. Obviously, the species that people enjoy eating have been hit hard: the lobster, the reef fish, the abalone, and many others. But the ecosystem is still largely intact. The invertebrates are in fairly good shape. There's a lot of hope to really look after this great African sea forest in the original home, what I call the heart of the world.
Mm-hmm. And I know that you are actually very active, not just as a filmmaker, but also with your nonprofit organization. And you also have a book coming out soon called Underwater Wild. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, actually, just quite interestingly, Tyler, I found out just this morning that the first publisher we had outside of South Africa was actually in Korea. So it'll be coming out quite soon in Korea.
That's great.
And it's a book I wrote with Ross Freiling, who started Sea Change project I started Sea Change Project with, a non-profit, and the book is really about a lot of our adventures in the Great African Sea Forest, a lot of the other animals that influenced us and taught us, Ross's amazing personal story of transformation in this place, and a lot of the science behind a lot of these discoveries. So it's almost like, you can imagine, if you enjoyed My Octopus Teacher, this gives a big background, much bigger background story to everything. You can only fit so much in a film, but so much more in a book.
Sorry to interrupt. So if someone watches My Octopus Teacher and they come away with any questions, they should probably be looking for Underwater Wild.
Exactly. The book answers a lot of those questions, and you see a lot of how my son grew up, and how he was influenced by it, how Ross's son also. So there's a lot of amazing background material.
Great, wonderful. So this year is the 15th session of the World Ocean Forum, and our theme for this year is actually ocean transformation. So that can take on very many different meanings depending on how you look at it. But from your perspective, what do you think is really necessary? What kind of transformation is needed in our relationship, our human relationship with the ocean in general?
That's the big question on everybody's minds, you know. And I think, you know, it all starts really, it starts with story and it starts with emotion. And if people can realize that this great ocean literally allows us to breathe, it's the thing that keeps us alive from minute to minute. And these animals it's hard for them. It's hard for wild animals to reach adulthood. It's hard for them to reproduce. And if we can just feel this extraordinary thing that this ocean is doing for us every minute of the day, and how much energy and goes into that. And if we can somehow just fall in love a little bit with this great Mother Ocean that's kept us going for so long, then we won't want to just keep extracting and keep putting so many multiple pressures on this ecosystem. We need to relieve so many of these human pressures on the system to give it time to recover. And I'm sure you know, with your work, you know all those pressures, from climate change to ocean warming to acidification to extraction. It just goes on, and we need it cannot handle so many pressures. So we need to relieve all that pressure and allow this extraordinary ecosystem with its unbelievable intelligence to regenerate itself. It knows how to do that. And that's absolutely critical, that a mindset changes from how much we can get out of her to actually maybe how much we can support her, because she supported us from the beginning of time.
Right, so we basically need some sort of emotive enlightenment with our relationship with the ocean that transitions to more of a nurturing, ironically natural relationship. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I could actually, if I had zero time restrictions, I just ask you a bajillion questions, but we do have a time restriction. So I'd like to sort of come to the end of our interview today, but I would like to give you the opportunity, if you have anything else that you would like to share with Korean viewers or anyone who is at the World Ocean Forum this year. Is there anything else that you would like to say, or something you would like them to ask themselves or to do?
If you could just give me a moment, I'm just going to ask my main advisor here, Swati, my wife. She's the real genius behind everything, and she's been listening, so she might have an idea. If you just give me 2 seconds.
Sure.
Swati, just Tyler's very kindly asking, there's one last thing I'd like to say, anything I might have left out to Korean viewers or to anybody.
Just that we all, every day we wake up in the morning and we make choices, right? And all of those choices have consequences. So to just tune in a little bit, make yourself aware, so that at least some of your choices are the right choices. Like, so everybody has the power to influence and bring about some change. You're not powerless, and that should give you hope. So Korea could be a place where they consume a lot of seafood, for example, but maybe if they just think about where it's coming from, how it's being affected.
Right. One piece of context just to add to that. South Koreans consume the most seafood per person around the world. Just FYI.
Wow, that's very cool.
Yeah.
So yes, Tyler, thanks for asking that. And I think that maybe your listeners and your viewers could consider, sometimes as individuals we feel powerless, but it's actually our choices, the things that we decide when we wake up in the morning. What are we going to consume today? How are we going to use our finance? And all those choices, if you just have in the back of your mind this great ocean and all those beautiful animals in that environment, do you really want to be putting more pressure on them in your decisions? So we're not powerless. As individuals, if we care and we make good choices, we can actually transform this incredible ocean. We can transform our planet, which is actually in real dire straits at the moment. We have a serious problem on our hands. I can't pretend that we're not in trouble. And so we all need to pull together from every single part of society and look after this incredible planet, this incredible ocean that's looked after us for so long.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very well said. Well, thank you so much, Craig, for taking the time to talk with us today. I look very forward to seeing Underwater Wild in Korean bookstores coming up soon. And anybody who's watching this right now, they're going to soon see a teaser trailer of myoctopusteacher. So anyone who hasn't seen it will eventually be watching it. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Wonderful talking to you, Tyler. Great interview. I really appreciate your passion and everything. Bless you. Thanks so much.
You. 세계해양포럼은 10월 26일부터 28일까지 온라인으로 아주 많은 다양한 이벤트를 준비했는데요. 선물도 다양한 상품을 준비해 놨으니까 여러분들의 많은 참여를 부탁드리겠습니다. 오늘도 아주 뜻깊은 시간을 보낸 것 같습니다. 항상 지구를 위해서 그리고 해양 생태계를 위해서 노력하는 모두가 됐으면 좋겠습니다. There is no second ocean. 세계해양포럼 화이팅!